Okay, so hi, my name is Jacques, and I'm part of the Cuban Master's Program, and I'm going to hopefully talk to you about your experience working at the EPA. So could you first introduce yourself to?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. My name's John. I'm a senior. I'm a double major in finance and public policy, so no real connection to the environment, but I was part of the DC Summer Institute last year, and there's an alum who's an office director at the EPA, and we got connected that way, and there was a way to kind of connect my business interest in public policy to what they're doing at the EPA, so that's how I ended up there.
Could you tell me about that connection that you made?
Yeah, he graduated in the 80s sometime, and I got his contact information from someone at the DC office, and he called me on the phone. We just talked about what my interests are, what they do. He was very busy, as an office director in the federal government, but the women married connection was nice, and then we just kind of agreed that it would be mutually beneficial if I could work there for the summer, so that's
Cool.
what I ended up doing.
So what was your role when you were at the EPA?
Yeah, there wasn't an official term, but I kind of describe it to people as a research analyst internship. Their office it was the Office of Sustainable Communities. It's not the typical EPA regulations, research heavy type of thing. They do a lot of community outreach focused on economic revitalization in environmentally sustainable ways. So my job was just kind of research an aspect of that, talk to people throughout the EPA, read a lot of articles, papers. It was a lot of reading, a lot of writing for 40 hours a week, but I ended up just writing a paper about public-private partnerships, which are kind of agreements that help the government and private businesses. So if the government doesn't have the means to fund something that really needs to get done, they can incentivize a company to do it with a monetary incentive. So an example would be in Detroit, the EPA is very active in Detroit, and if a company wants to revitalize a certain downtown area, the EPA would incentivize them to do that by just letting them charge a certain percentage of rent for the apartments they build, or take the rent that businesses pay to have their company there. So it's helping the area through facilitation of the government, but not necessarily using government resources.
What did you, learn from that experience? Was that something that you looked at previously at all?
I realized I do not want to be a professor. I could not research and write all day. But I liked learning about it, and it was interesting. So I had a good time while I was doing it, but definitely something I don't want to do for the long term.
Yeah. How were you kind of able to connect maybe your previous academic or previous interests to kind of your role when you were at the EPA?
Well, just not necessarily the finance part, because that's a lot of Excel and numbers and everything, but public policy part, just kind of understanding how the government works. I mean, when I showed up, it took me a week to get my computer. I was just sitting at my cubicle for a week. So the government moves slowly. Definitely it's not as efficient as a private business would be. But just knowing how that works, and then just the research and the writing and building off the skills I've learned in school is definitely applicable.
What was the environment like when you worked there?
It was very friendly, very cordial. It was a big mix of ages. There were probably a few people in their 20s and 30s, a lot in their middle ages. Everybody was busy, and my office is unique because they do a lot of grants and outreach. So a lot of times people were out on visits across the country, so sometimes the office was quiet, sometimes it was louder. But yeah, I had my own cubicle. It was interesting environment.
Do you think there's more role for government and private partnerships or more outreach type of things within that type of environment, or do you think that there's like it's like more common than people believe?
I mean, yeah, the growth for public-private partnerships, I'll just say P3s is what I called them. It's definitely been growing, definitely more popular. It's widely used in real estate, or not real estate, transportation, which kind of went through the like toll roads and whatnot. Private companies build the roads and then they get to charge a toll. But even for economic areas or environmental areas or projects, they've been successful, and that growth is important just as the government doesn't have the resources to do everything themselves. With less people, less money, less time, incentivizing private businesses to do that work for them, it's very beneficial.
What were, I guess, some of the communities or the things that like they were trying to like work with?
Yeah, so I mentioned Detroit. It's a lot of small communities, so they just like accept applications. I don't remember the specific names of the communities, but there was one in, I think it was Massachusetts, that was largely a fishing town, and a large conglomerate had just kind of overtaken the area and moved out a lot of the jobs, and they're like, how do we keep our economy going with this history that we have,
Right.
and make sure that it's like environmentally sustainable at the same time. So there's a lot of suggestions that way. I remember one community has a river running right through the middle of town, or a creek, not a huge river, but the flooding would be devastating. And with rising sea levels and all that sort of thing, they're just trying to plan for how they can protect their community in the face of climate change. So it was interesting. It's not something you would think that the EPA has a large focus on business and protecting communities, but it was interesting and I enjoyed it.
What do you think was like the greatest challenges when you were on the job, and what do you think were like the greatest, what was like the most rewarding part?
I mean, challenges, it was just hard staying on task. I was in a cubicle by myself for 8-9 hours a day. Not something I'm used to, just sitting there by myself. And then just reading and writing, it's not the most exciting of tasks. So staying on task was one of the harder parts, but the rewarding part was just seeing what I was contributing. It was like rewarding to see that. The office director was very appreciative of the work I was doing, and he was like, this would be interesting, we'd love to incorporate this more. So he thanked me for doing it, and I thought if they continue to do it down the line, then I had my impact, and that would be cool.
What do you think, I guess, what do you think was like the most helpful thing from William and Mary when, or like just stuff in general, when you like took on the position? And I guess also, what do you think are some qualities or characteristics that people are looking for when they're hiring students?
William and Mary definitely taught me just kind of like teamwork. Although my work was an individual, like the office is a team, and efficiency is important. But when I felt like they were just like really surprised that there was another William and Mary intern with me through the program, and we just were very upfront about communication, any concerns we had. We got our work done on time. I mean, those are little things, but when they're in the bureaucracy, which a bunch of other people, sometimes it gets slow. And then you bring in these kids in and you're going to be like, oh, they have no idea what they're doing. So they were just kind of surprised that we were able to contribute immediately as we were. So just like being aware of your surroundings and understanding where you can contribute and exceeding people's expectations for you is just definitely important.
Yeah. Do you think there are any things that like students can do if they're looking to like work potentially in EPA in the future, of like any types of like I guess qualifications or classes or experiences or any type of thing like that aspect, or like you
I
have
mean,
any,
yeah, I would take as many classes and experiences at William & Mary related to the environment. I didn't really have that.
Right.
I'm sure it would help.
Right.
Keep up on what the EPA is doing. They're always busy doing things, publishing reports. If you can keep up with that, and then when you get to talking with someone, bringing that up would be helpful. And then, yeah, I don't know if everybody has a LinkedIn, but there are connections from William & Mary. The DC office was really helpful. They have a ton of alumni networks where people work, so get in contact with them. Just getting your foot in the door,
Right.
and then having something to contribute once someone knows who you are. It's a
Yeah.
big part of it.
So I think one thing that people often think about is like you mentioned that you like met the William & Mary alum and he helped you like get adjusted and get the position. But do you like have any advice for students who are interested in doing that? Like you walk through like how that like happened, or like yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as a business major, networking is like a huge part of it.
Mhm.
So I'm pretty familiar with it. But if you're not, these people live busy lives, and you don't have to look at it as an exchange. You're just trying to get to know them, and they would love to help you as much as you want them to maybe give you like a job or an internship. Just talking with them about other interests, other things, it kind of just gets the conversation flowing. And if you like just outreach, just getting an email, getting a phone number, 5-10 minutes of their time is enough just for them to remember your name and who you are, then it's worthwhile in the long run. Anybody can handle a 5-minute conversation. I think once you're,
Yeah.
if you can take a chance to build a different set of skills besides the one you're learning in school, then you have much more you can contribute down the line for a job. So it may not necessarily be your first goal to find something out of your field, but don't turn it away just because you don't think it has anything to contribute in the long run.
Cool. Let's see. I guess as a person, do you have any like long-term goals or visions?
Yeah, I'd love to be, maybe get my MBA one day, kind of lead a strategy-focused leadership position in a company or nonprofit, but maintaining a work-life balance that allows me to do other things is probably my number one priority. Not find a good paying job and have a stable income, but understand that there are way more important things you can do in your life.
What about the EPA? Do you have any like thoughts on like the future of the EPA, or like where do you hope it would go in the future?
The EPA, I mean, I learned this summer it was actually started by a Republican, Richard Nixon, which I thought was kind of contradictory to the environment we find today. But I think the EPA is facing its current struggles because of the regulatory approach. They're kind of trying to pass their own laws,
Right.
rather than just provide the information and the research and saying, if this happens, what you can do to fight it. So maybe not, like they're taking a very proactive approach that's kind of turning some people off. But I think the EPA is vital to making sure that the country stays strong economically and safety and health-wise. It's an important factor for that.
So you think maybe you can take a more like a collaborative approach?
Yeah, I know they have a ton of partnerships with other agencies. We worked with the, what's it called? Housing and Urban Development a lot, to making sure housing is built in safe ways. Like lead paint is still a big problem in a lot of areas. So partnerships like with Department of Agriculture, kind of making local food, healthy food, that sort of thing. They can partner with that and make sure the environment gets inputted into other programs. Is a good way of making sure they stay relevant in this political climate.
Yeah, cool. Do you have any other final thoughts about your experiences that you'd like to share that you really think, this was a really cool thing that I didn't get to mention, or just like anything else about your time there?
I would just enjoy it while you're there. Make connections, keep contact with people. I've emailed a few people that I worked for after the election, and they said they're very busy trying to figure out what on earth they're doing. But it's just a cool experience that I had, and even though I don't want to do it for the rest of my life, it's something I can always talk about as something that broke up the monotony of whatever I end up doing. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks.